So I'm down at the bottom of that pitch, standing on the ledge, and I cannot for the life of me figure out a bowline on a coil. And I tied it, and I tied it, and I tied it, and I tied it. And I tied it, and I stared at it, and I tied it, and I tied it, and I tied it. And finally, I just put it on because I knew that the unidentified knot that I had down there was not going to come apart while I third-classed up the crack. That was my intention. In fact, when I fell, that's the first thing that came to my mind was, how am I going to explain this knot?
For some, a simple backyard adventure can light a spark that fuels your fire to spend the rest of your life in and among the mountains. With each outing, you add another layer of experience. And most of these layers are positive. The pinks and purples of a Wyoming sunrise, the smile on your partner's face as you reach a mountain summit, and the view stretches on and on forever. Other experiences are painful and downright regrettable. Those gnarly blisters and forgotten gear, or an unsecured pack or tent that gets scooped up by a gust of wind and seemingly sent airmail all the way to Nebraska. Not that I've ever seen that happen. And then one day, after a lifetime of adventure, you wake up and your layers are as deep and resilient as the bark of a redwood tree. Welcome back to The Fine Line. I'm Matt Hansen. In this next episode, we're going to look at the many different layers that can be involved in the life of a climber, and how some very complex layers were exposed during a single climb of the Grand Teton last summer. We'll hear about this climber's battle with Parkinson's, and how the disease led to a few fateful decisions and a heated argument with park rangers on the Exum Ridge. We'll hear how the Jenny Lake climbing rangers respond to such complicated situations as they balance visitor safety, resource protection, and allowing those same visitors to enjoy the freedom of the hills. At the outset of this episode, I just want to remind all of our listeners of how difficult it can be for someone to come forward to talk about an accident. To be vulnerable and admit your mistakes in a public forum such as this is a very steep hill to climb. And for that, we should extend our respect and our grace. Because we all make mistakes, but not all of us admit them. Thank you for your understanding and for listening. The Fine Line is produced by Backcountry Zero, a project of the Teton County Search and Rescue Foundation to elevate preventative search and rescue. To see the full list of Backcountry Zero's summer programming and risk management workshops, go to the events page at backcountryzero.com. And if you like this podcast, please leave us a review wherever you listen. After this quick break, join us for a trip up the Grand Teton's Exum Ridge.
This episode of The Fine Line is sponsored by Arc'teryx, a global design company based in the Coast Mountains of British Columbia, specializing in technical, high-performance apparel, outerwear, and equipment. For over 35 years, Arc'teryx has built trusted systems for points of critical need, inspired by athletes who are pushing the limits of possibility in alpine environments. Woven into the DNA of everything Arc'teryx makes are years of lessons from the mountains, trusted by mountain athletes and worn when it counts. Everything Arc'teryx does starts with a simple belief: the mountains make us better. Learn more at arcteryx.com.
All of us are very different at Jenny Lake. You know, there's some of us that do really well with like confrontational conversations with people.
This is Lexie Hunsaker, a seasonal Jenny Lake climbing ranger in Grand Teton National Park. She's speaking to climber Dave Black about an encounter he had with rangers last summer on the Grand Teton.
Something I struggle with is you see a lot of people in the mountains when we're working that maybe in your mind are making not the best decisions, or you see things out there that seem sketchy or like not super safe. And it's really hard to have those conversations with people. It's like, okay, at what point do I say something and intervene with this situation?
Yeah.
Because I don't want to ruin someone's experience. And I know that I've learned so much and grown a lot through making mistakes, just in life in general, but in the mountains. And I'm not saying this is your mindset, but I think a lot of people have this mindset of, if anything happens to me, it's okay. We'll just call for help and someone will come. And again, I'm not saying that was your mindset, but I think people don't consider the risk that they're also putting other people at. And I want to help. Like, doing rescue work gives me a lot of meaning in life, and I want to help people and impacting people's lives and actually like saving people's lives. That is such an incredible experience to have, and I feel really grateful that I get to do that for work. But I feel like sometimes people don't like recognize the big picture and like the risk associated. Like, short hauling does have risk. Being in the mountains has risk. There's rockfall. The Tetons are notoriously loose. There's thunderstorms. You can get struck by, so it's just like all of these things that we take into account. And obviously we won't go out into a situation if we deem it unsafe. But so it's really challenging to have those conversations with people. But also at the same time, it's like we are the people that will come back and pick you up.
Mm-hmm. That's why I'm willing to come in and talk about this, because I made mistakes and did expose you to increased risk. And I'm an ex-firefighter, full-time firefighter. And I've done a lot of rescue, and that's ironic that I'm in this seat, but I understand that exactly what you're saying. And I would be a liar if I denied it. Yeah, that's been the reason why I have followed up on this, because I owe it to everybody that I put at risk and everyone that I pissed off, or what? Oh, I guess can't say that.
Everyone, you could say anything.
Everyone that I may have offended. And I owe it to them to be honest. Man, you can't be honest if you don't admit it, So I apologize for putting you at risk. That's a basic rescue / EMS thing. You don't put other people at risk, and you don't become part of the problem. And that day, I put everybody at risk. And I was the problem. I think from 69, 60, 67, 68 to 2000, which is when I kicked back a little bit in 2000. I think I was on the rock 5-6 days a week for 40 years. So, I spent a lot of time on it. Wouldn't even attempt to sum it up, My name's Dave Black. I'm retired, 73-year-old, and been climbing since the mid-60s, and guiding since like the 75 or 76. The way I got into it was I had a sick brother, and he passed away at home, and I was terrifically stressed out about it. I just needed to dump it somewhere. And I went into the mountains, and it was like the perfect place to leave it. And after that, I just used it as my major source of cooling off or de-stressing and getting some solitude. Originally, I'm from Utah. Brigham City is where I was raised, and I spent quite a bit of time down in Moab and around Bears Ears. When I was in Moab, I was guiding. And when I was in landing, I was being a dad. So I lived there about 6 years before I went to Hawaii to work. And then I just kind of commuted back and forth between Utah and Hawaii for 16 years. Excuse my voice. I have Parkinson's, and I was diagnosed in 2014, and I was 2 years ago. It had progressed to the point where I could barely walk. A really close friend here in town convinced me to go get deep brain surgery, deep brain stimulation, which is what these bumps are on my head. And they did it, and it was really very successful. In fact, the minute the surgery was done, the second I was, first time I was awake, I immediately noticed a change. I decided, I don't know, people who go through something like that, it's almost like a ritual. You have to prove it to yourself that you're not changed, or you have to prove it to yourself that you can still do it, you still got it. And so I thought, I've got this new lease on my life. I need to go up to the Tetons and get to the summit again. And I basically had two goals. The first time I ever did a climb here, it was the south face of the drugstore in 1969. And I was bound and determined to go do the south face of the drugstore and the Exum Ridge. And so I got up here, went bouldering on the south face, and it quickly became apparent to me that wasn't going to happen. And so folks started focusing on the Exum Ridge, and I just liked it because I've probably got somewhere around 15 to 20 ascents on the Grand. Most of them were done on the Ponal Gilkey. Are you familiar with the Ponal Gilkey?
Oh, yeah, I know the PG.
Okay. Well, I used to clean it on June 15th or whatever that was, when they made it okay for everyone else to.
Oh, yeah.
So that's where most of my ascents were. But I did several ascents on the Exum, and I loved the view. The exposure was wonderful until about 6 months ago. The exposure was great, and the view was out of this world.
Yeah, I mean, the rock on the upper Exum is some of the best in the Tetons. It's amazing. I love the upper Exum. My name is Lexie Hunsaker. I work seasonally as a Jenny Lake climbing ranger in Grand Teton National Park in the summers and do an assortment of jobs during the wintertime. I live in Grand Teton in the summers and currently am living on the Idaho side of the Tetons while I am in school.
With his new lease on life, Dave started to look at once again scaling the Grand Teton. His focus was on the Exum Ridge. He invited two other climbers in his social circle to be his partners on the mountain. One was 16 years old, the other was 21. He'd mentioned the trip to his Parkinson support group in Jackson, and they supported it. As the three climbers got ready for their climb on July 16th, they went over knot tying and rope work, gear selection and packing, and did some training routes up Blacktail Butte.
We went over knots and some basic rigging. I didn't feel like we were completely ready, but I felt like we could make it up and down safely. I think it was a Sunday. It was the last day that we were training together, and we were actually packing. And I was seeing what they brought, and we were talking about how packing our packs. And I told them specifically, look, guys, I think you're going to have to carry up everything, because that's going to make the difference between my getting to the top and not. And the gentleman agreed to it. And I thought I was getting away with murder, like, oh, this is great. I'm not going to have to carry a thing up the ground.
When Dave and his young climbing partners got to the trailhead at Lupin Meadows, they began assessing their backpacks. To Dave's great disappointment, he ended up having to carry a full pack: water, sleeping gear, climbing rope, stove, and food. And right when they began to go uphill, things started to go downhill.
They would find a way to the next place where they wanted to stop and wait. And they were very kind to me, and I did catch up to them at the meadows.
During these conversations on the trail, the boys suggested a new plan. They said they would run up to the lower saddle, drop off their gear, and then come back down, grab Dave's pack, and carry it up the rest of the way. And so the younger two climbers took off. As the sun got lower and they didn't reappear, Dave started to get really worried. Were they lost? Had they taken a wrong turn? Were they injured somewhere and needed help? The stress of that uncertainty boiled up inside him. And meanwhile, fatigue was setting in. He busted out his stove to make some coffee and wait some more. It had been 5 or 6 hours since he'd last seen his young climbing partners. When the sun went down and there was still no sign of them, he scanned the blackness for headlamps. Still nothing. So he threw down a bivvy and tried to get some rest, deciding that he would continue up the rest of the way to the lower saddle at first light.
And then as soon as the light came up, I got some coffee, stashed my bivvy gear, and headed out up to the top of the head wall and up to the saddle, and I found him about mid-morning over by the Exum hut. I kind of understood why they didn't want to turn around and come back down and get the bag like they said they would. But I wasn't feeling particularly forgiving at the time. But I did understand. And when I asked them to explain why they didn't come down, they really didn't have anything to say to me.
After regrouping, they were able to eat some food, take a little breather, and the three of them departed from the lower saddle around 11 a.m. on July 16th.
So there were quite a few climbers, and it was relatively balmy up there. The sky was blue. You could see forever. We continued up to this site where there's a bunch of boulders just below what's called the Black Dyke. There was a gentleman in there who identified himself as a ranger.
As Dave recalls, the ranger had convinced the older of the two climbers to turn around due to lightning in the forecast. It led to a heated confrontation.
So he decided he was going to go down. And he left. And I was livid because I felt like, and the ranger obviously was just trying to help because he could see this collision coming, right? He was just trying to keep us from having an incident. And but I was livid because the older one was the only other adult in the party. And he was also the most experienced of the two. So I let some invectives fly in the conversations that I was having with the ranger.
This is where the story deepens in its complexity and brings up a topic that doesn't often get addressed, either in the moment or in the aftermath. And that is how to resolve a conflict with another person out in the mountains. In the best scenario, level heads prevail and it leads to a civil discussion where people can learn from each other. But when stress levels are high and people are fatigued, tempers flare and things can quickly spiral out of control. In this case, rangers vocalized concern over Dave's climbing party that they believed was either unprepared or too late to ascend a dangerous route. Rangers' concerns over lightning, especially on the Grand, can be well understood given its tragic history. Just go back and listen to episode 23 of The Fine Line. That conversation Dave had with rangers did not go over too well at all, something he says he really regrets. With the third member of their party heading down the mountain, Dave and the 16-year-old boy continued up the route, traversing over the wildly exposed Wall Street and the step across to the base of what's called the Golden Staircase. At this point, Dave is off his meds, and he's argued with a park ranger. To help you understand how this can happen, he says it's important to know the effects of Parkinson's.
Parkinson's disease is a disease where the brain is affected because it's stopped producing dopamine and you have to replace it. There's no cure for it. There are things you can do to slow it down, but the damage is done years before and just appears later, and there's very little you can do about it. And it's progressive and it's degenerative. If you're taking the medication, you need to be right on top of it. It's got to be on time. It's got to be enough. It's got to be not too little. It's not too late. If you don't watch out and you're not careful, can, in some combination, cause you to go into what's called Parkinson's severe off, or Parkinson's extreme off, or sometimes called Parkinson's storm. And what it is it's an acute exacerbation of the symptoms of Parkinson's disease. And if you know what the symptoms are, you'll kind of understand what an exacerbation would be like. Well, the way you get into a Parkinson's severe off is usually by going through some kind of change in your medication regimen. Too much, too little, not taking it at all. And during a road trip, during a hike into the wilderness, I'm notoriously bad at not having access to my meds. They're in the bottom of my pack, or they're lost in the car, and then in the chaos. The three factors are for it. It's mostly a matter of a med change. The two other factors that are not quite as influential, but are big time influential, are stress and lack of sleep. By the time I got up to the saddle, I was toast. When I lost my temper with the ranger, my voice was like this. I was moving slow. I was stooped over. I was, and it was fairly obvious to me that I was having an off day. And I mean, it's pretty casual when you say, like, I'm having an off day. But it took off like a bat out of hell. And this is the reason why I think this is kind of important. And it's the reason why I'm willing to go through this again and talk to you about it. And because I am totally responsible for this accident. Totally responsible for it. But it wouldn't do me any good to say I'm responsible without saying what I think happened, and what can be done about it in the field, because you're going to see this again. I can guarantee it. There's probably something like between 30 and 40,000 active climbers. I mean, very active climbers who have Parkinson's disease. And the prediction is that will double by 2030. You're going to have between 60 and 80,000 people with Parkinson's disease running all over your crags. What you're looking for in somebody that is undergoing or about to undergo this event is they're going to be shaky, slow, slurred, stiff, stooped, strained, stressed, and stupid. Just means they're going to have deficits in their movement and deficits in their cognition. When we got over there to that point, and I was figuring out how I was going to get up there, I decided I was going to tie into the rope with a bowline on a coil and flip it around to my back so that the rope would stay out of the crack. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay, so the rope would be out of the crack. It wouldn't be interfering with my feet in there. So I'm down at the bottom of that pitch, standing on the ledge, and I cannot for the life of me figure out a bowline on a coil. And I tied it, and I tied it, and I tied it, and I tied it. I tied it, and I stared at it, and I tied it, and I tied it, and I tied it. And finally, I just put it on because I knew that the unidentified knot that I had down there was not going to come apart while I third-classed up the crack. That was my intention. And then I started wondering, in fact, when I fell, that's the first thing that came to my mind was, how am I going to explain this knot? Okay, so thinking back on that, there is no doubt in my mind that I was suffering from a cognitive change going on there.
Do you remember falling?
I remember my wrists giving out. It's funny because I don't remember coming up Wall Street. We obviously did. So I don't remember anything until I heard your voice. Well, after the accident, except for the fact that I was doing stupid things. But I do remember falling. My wrists gave out. They just gave out like somebody turned the light switch off, you know. I just had no strength in them. And put them in as far as I could. And I was sliding down this crack, looking down, trying to see the boulders that were on the ledge down there, hoping that I could fall into the boulders and get some sort of passive belay from it off of my non-knot tied to my waist. So then, so the whole thing was ridiculous. But, and that's where I ended up. I came out of the crack. I was looking down at the boulders thinking that's where I needed to go, and off I came, and that's where I landed.
How far of a fall was it?
15 to 20 feet, I think. I couldn't see the guy I was with, so I was fairly high up.
What's the overall exposure there? Like if you had missed those boulders, like what's that look like?
Hundreds of feet.
Bad.
Yeah.
With Dave lying in extreme pain on a pile of boulders on the edge of hundreds of feet of exposure, his young partner dials 911.
I think this call, it sounded like a severely injured patient up in a technical spot on the Grand Teton. Requested the helicopter pretty quickly. Our pilot that day is this guy, John Burke, who's a phenomenal pilot. Him and both Steve Wilson are typically our pilots that we use. We were using the Teton County SAR ship for this rescue. And so, ordered the helicopter. I don't fully remember what I was doing that day, but typically they'll call resources in. Usually they call people that are on duty, but all of us live right next to the rescue cache. So it's kind of a all hands on deck. And so went to the rescue cache. My coworker, Ken Kreis, showed up, and Case Martin were also there. And whenever we do a short haul mission, we have the pilot, and then we have what we call a spotter. So they're the person that are in the helicopter with the pilot, and they pretty much keep their eyes on the short hauler the whole time and then do other things while they're flying with the pilot. We got to the lower saddle. We have a little spot that we can rig the helicopter with the short haul line there. So we rigged the helicopter there at the lower saddle, and due to the weather, because the storms had started moving in at this point, and just like amount we've been flying and everything, we decided to just insert one person at a time. It also can be really nice to insert just one person when it's more of like a technical small spot, just if there's not a ton of room for two people. Decided to insert Ken Kreis first, and then they came back and I got inserted second.
Yeah, and when you get on scene, what does that look like for you? What's happening with this incident when you touch down and you unclip from the rope?
We landed at the base of the golden staircase, and you wrapped around that ledge maybe like 20, 30 feet to get to the corner system that you were underneath. So yeah, went over there. Ken at this point had already started doing a patient assessment. I ended up helping out with that, trying to do a head to toe for you just to see what kind of injuries we had going on. We were trying to get vital signs, knew that you had Parkinson's. And then, like I said, it was stormy that afternoon. Thunderstorms are pretty common in the Tetons in the summer in the afternoons. And so, yeah, our like number one priority was to get you out of there. You're one of my first patients I've had that have had Parkinson's. And it was interesting, you know, when you do a head to toe on a patient, you're like touching all of their body, like, you know, you start with their head and just work your way down. And anywhere I touched you, like shoulder, arm, you would seize and seem like you were in a lot of pain. So it was actually really difficult to tell where you were injured because it kind of seemed like you were hurting everywhere. The spot you landed in, your head, I don't know if you recall, but your head was on the edge of this ledge. If you had been just a little bit further out, you would have gone the distance. And yeah, you guys weren't tied into anything. So we then just focused on getting you packaged, gave you some pain medications so that we could move you. You were in quite a bit of pain. We ordered the litter to be brought in, and that was also brought in on the end of the helicopter line. The pilot, again, we had that day was John Burke, and he wanted to bring in the litter a little bit different than we typically bring it in. Normally we have it in like a horizontal configuration, but due to where we were at, like there was just a lot of boulders and, you know, there's like a steep face behind us. I think he ultimately made the call that he wanted to insert the litter in a vertical scenario instead, which worked great. And it was actually really nice to receive the litter like that because then you could just grab onto it and then set it down wherever. But yeah, so we got the litter in, and then Ken and I moved you onto the litter, finished packaging you up, and Ken flew out with you, so he attended the litter. So you guys took off, and at that point, because I was with the other member of your team, he wasn't injured. I had enough stuff that I could down guide him back to the lower saddle, get him off the mountain okay. But due to the storms moving in, it would have been a little spicy up there. And they were able to fly back up and pick up myself with a partner. So I flew out with your partner down to the rescue cache.
Dave spent the next 5 days in the hospital. He had a collapsed lung, 2 broken vertebrae in his spine, and a badly damaged hand. During his stay in the hospital, he began to piece together what happened and became horrified about his interactions with the park rangers up on the climb and embarrassed about how he hadn't monitored his condition more closely.
You did a wonderful job. I was just so grateful. I can't thank you enough. And if I could afford it, I'd take you all to Mexico and party for a week. But it's not my cards. But
I'm
you
busy
deserve
anyway. It's okay.
I have nothing but admiration for these folks.
Thanks.
Amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think, things happen, and all of us get in situations where maybe we wish we had made different decisions, or, and it will continue to happen to all of us.
Yeah.
So I think, just figuring out how to learn from it. And thank you for being open and talking about it, because especially if you have a bunch of climbing experience, I'm sure it's difficult to be in that situation.
I did want to mention one thing about
Please.
My My partner, he was, you got to know him a little bit.
Just a little bit, yeah.
I feel like he he really stuck his neck out for my benefit, because I feel like he and I don't talk, but I feel like he kind of saw or felt like I was tanking. Instead of turning around and going down with the older guy, he decided to stick with me to pull my ass out of the fire, so to speak. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, he had your back.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to say to him?
Yeah. You know who I'm talking to, and thanks. When I got home, I decided, babe, you're done in the mountains. And I scraped up all my gear and gave it to him. And I hope I think a couple of weeks later, he did Disappointment or something like that. Okay. So I hope he's still inspired to get into the mountains, and maybe he can get the same stuff I got out of it. And I was lucky I didn't land on my head, because I'd be dead. What would I do different? Mm-hmm. What wouldn't I do different on that? I would have prepared the boys more. I would refuse to take the load on the day when we divvied up the gear. And then I would have refused the separation that split us up. And then once I got up there and I knew that something was wrong, I wish I would have had the clear thinking enough to turn around. That's what I would have done differently.
Well, I think it says a lot about a person who can admit their mistakes. So thank you very much for sharing.
You're welcome. Good luck to you and everything you do.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks for being here, Lexie.
Yeah, thank you.
That was climber Dave Black speaking to Lexie Hunsaker, a Jenny Lake climbing ranger with Grand Teton National Park. And this is The Fine Line. Our theme song is by Ann and Pete Sibley, with additional music produced by Victor, Idaho-based musician Ben Winship. The original cover art is by Jen Reddy. Our editing and sound are by Melinda Binks. My name is Matt Hansen. This interview was recorded in the studios of KHOL 89.1 FM in Jackson. The Fine Line is a production of Backcountry Zero, an initiative from the Teton County Search and Rescue Foundation to use education, outreach, and storytelling to prevent backcountry accidents. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and listen every Thursday at 2 p.m. on KHOL. A new episode lands in just a few weeks. Learn more at backcountryzero.com.